All right, so you may have caught that on TV, hopefully on social media. The campaign, we worked with the Ad Council on this, and the effort was really multi-pronged, very helpful. So thank you, Julie. Anyway, you might have noticed the rodeo footage passed by very quickly. For any Texans in our group this morning, the footage actually did come from the Fort Worth Stockyards, something I actually recognized. With that, I'd like to introduce everyone to our partner with the NFL, John Nabavi. John serves as the NFL's Vice President of Public Policy and Government Affairs. He is here to share the lay of the land on reopening venues. John, thank you very much for joining us today, and the floor is all yours.
Hey, good morning, Brian and Julie. Thanks so much for having me, and great to hear about all the success and hard work that the Horse Council was really championing last year. Really impressive stuff, and it takes me back a little bit to our efforts as well through 2020. Job one for the NFL was, excuse me, was to find a way to get stadiums open. Pure and simple. It was less about fans and a return to business than it was get the games played, and that started even going back further than that in April when we had the draft virtually. It was sort of the first mass event that I think set the tone for a lot of positivity coming out of the pandemic, and also sort of talked to the power of media, right, and the power that we as sports organizations have being able to promote a healthy message, which gets us through that year. We made our efforts to make sure we could have the games played, and eventually got to a place where, in fact, a majority of our stadiums had fans during the 2020 season, leading into the Super Bowl in Tampa, where we had 5,000 fans, including vaccinated workers that we gave free Super Bowl tickets to again promote vaccine adoption. Because going forward, it's all about making sure people have vaccines so we can get back again to normal. So it was great to partner with AAHC on that effort with the Ad Council. And looking forward too, I think we feel like there's a pretty positive story. We continue to see positive reopening news around the country, with COVID cases continuing to decline, reaching their lowest levels really now since March 2020. 64% of U.S. adults have received at least one vaccination shot. And the other metrics that we look at in terms of including hospitalization, mortality, are really much improved, especially compared to where we were just 5 months ago. So that leads us to a pretty good place, right? I think we're all probably looking and saying, when can we really get back to normal? Well, 22 of 30 MLB stadiums are anticipated to increase to 100% capacity by the end of the month. And talking to our friends at baseball, all but 5 will fill up by the end of the 4th of July weekend. For the NFL, I think we're even maybe in a little bit better situation because we have some more runway. Our season really kicks off, with preseason in August. And we're looking right now at 100% capacity in almost all stadiums, and certainly fans in all stadiums, and really we'll see where we get to. But again, it goes back to, this is a hyper local effort. So while the conversations and the work that we've done with the White House COVID task force has been really important. We've plugged in with them as of other sports organizations to talk to them about how can we promote the vaccine to populations, frankly, that are skeptical. And those include, the African American community and conservatives. And so, once we get to those big numbers, and the goal the president stated was 70%, I think, first shots by July 4th, which will probably be tough to get to, but if we don't get there by July 4th, maybe shortly thereafter. We're hoping to see some even more relaxations from CDC on some of their guidance that allow us to get back to more full events and that sense of normalcy. But all those top line things are really important. Again, for us, it's as you all know, working with your state and local officials. They're looking at that guidance, looking at those numbers, and then making the decision for their communities. So, it's a challenging, issue when you have 32 teams in 26 states with different cities. overlaying all of that, I think we're really excited. Hopefully we get back up to those numbers. But again, it's sort of a local process where when we reach 70% across the board, we'll feel really, really good. So that's sort of, I think that the broader, update, I'd point out too, look, we're certainly proud of the effort here, amongst so many of our friends and stakeholders across sports. At the NFL, we had 21 NFL stadiums administer 3.5 million vaccines, and that continues to grow. And for us, I think it was important because those are the early vaccines, right? It's funny to think about, but the incredible demand early on, right? Just the logistics of figuring out how to do it. And our stadiums served as, community resources, which is again important, building goodwill amongst from, all the stakeholders and policymakers. We're going to continue to donate Super Bowl tickets for giveaways to promote vaccine adoptions. Significant funding of organizations like Team Rubicon, which go out to rural communities. They're a veterans organization. They'll go out to rural, underserved communities, and these are folks that deployed to war zones. Take those skills, those logistics skills, and really get out there and do that. And our draft-a-thon continues. Next phase is going to be, really the conversation promoting the vaccine to populations that are newly eligible, young people, 12 to 18-year-olds. We're doing that through our partners and working with parents to help make those positive decisions. But I encourage, I think everyone here as we look to get back to normal, it's important to be having those conversations. And doing what we can to continue to promote, provide incentives for people to vaccinate if we want to get our businesses back on track. So that's sort of the snapshot of what's going on. Again, we feel really positive about where we'll be, come August. I think when we have a really robust data and analytics team that talks to scientists across the country and inputs really good data. I think we'd project 70% vaccine adoption, that's sort of herd immunity by October 15th. Luckily, a lot of the state relaxation policies have already come into effect, which again is important. So that's I think that the snapshot there. Happy to take any questions or talk more about sort of how we've partnered together and continue to go forward.
Great, thank you, John. I do have one question in the queue here. Could you tell us a little bit more about the outreach to the administration during the early weeks, I would say, of 2021, and sort of the results that came out of those talks? Obviously, it's a new administration. They're still appointing people to fill out their team, but we as a coalition were clearly able to get in and get our points across.
Yeah, it's a good point. Look, we've been engaged with state and local policymakers and the previous administration, and this is always the thing that everyone has been working on for the last 18 months. So incredible momentum and dedication by the incoming administration to really address these issues. So luckily they recognized our willingness and the value of our partnership to them, as their message again was vaccine adoption, right? We all have different constituencies within the sort of sports fan world. And we were able to work with the COVID task force, in the White House's office and have those conversations with CDC and HHS and really people all the way to the top, have Dr. Fauci and other decision makers and policy leaders, brief us and bring the best available information to help us disseminate that to all the folks out there that want to make informed decisions that are fans of our respective sports and organizations. And it's continued, right? This isn't over. The one of the more latest things we're engaged on is working with the Department of Education and others there, again, about what is vaccine distribution going to look like for younger folks. Leave aside the question of making decisions. just actual deployment, so we have a whole partnership across a number of categories with different organizations like USA Football. How do we loop them in as kids are out of school to help, sort of facilitate that effort? So the work continues. I think we're really proud and excited by all the effort that we've been able to put behind this in collaboration with the White House and different folks there. And good that I think it speaks well that we were all here ready to go and really plug in when that opportunity came about.
Right. Thank you very much. And would you say the messaging with the changing administrations changed at all, or was it more of a seamless kind of segue from one administration to the next?
I think, well, we all know that there's challenges in any administration with messaging, right? Consistency. And it's not really to get into the tactics. People find, fault and criticize certain things here and there, and everyone, would always go back and do sort of some things differently. But overall, look, I think everyone, who's worked on these issues has been really on the same page about what do we got to do to get shots in arms and get people back into the workforce, get life back to normal. And so, frankly, it was pretty, it was a good process really throughout the transition. So I commend both administrations for that.
Great. John, let's see, I'm going to check the queue here, see if other questions have fallen in.
Brian, I just threw a question out on the chat to the attendees. I believe they've had at least one racetrack, maybe a couple of horse competitions that have hosted a vaccination day, and I was just calling the group to see if anybody could share what their experience has been about that in our sector. I know that we've got spectators back at events. I don't know to what capacity level, and was just curious if anybody had comments or questions for John about what specifically is going on in the equine community.
That's right. We had the Upperville Horse Show last week, which was closed yesterday, and it looked like it was fairly full. So, John, to underscore one more point, obviously the guidelines that came out last year focused on state level action. When your season kicks off, do you foresee any geographical unevenness in stadium capacity and openness, or will it? This is kind of a crystal ball question, but will it be pretty even throughout the country?
It's possible. The last 15 months have been marked by just sort of that, unevenness between what you can and can't do. It's no secret to any of us. And how many times living here in DC, I wish I was down in Florida or Texas. That said, I think that what we are seeing is that we feel really good that by the fall, when we're playing our games, that it's going to be pretty even. And I think some of the big state movers in the Northeast have kind of gotten folks comfortable, right? It's interesting watching the process play out. The governors do talk to each other. Unfortunately, some of these decisions can be political, to some extent. In the idea that people want to be cautious and not necessarily be first movers. But now we're really getting to sort of a good place. And the question here, Julie, that you threw out about hosting vaccine events, which I see Sarah Colvin talking about the Kentucky Horse Park location. I think that's incredibly important. I can't commend our teams enough and our individual clubs, right? They're the ones that in so many cases stepped up and put sort of the boots on the ground and hosted these events for mass vaccination. It's incredibly important too, we all recognize the value of political advocacy, making sure that we're all communicating, your membership or talking to Brian and Julie, and we're asking the same things of our clubs. Tell us what you're doing, and making sure we're telling that story to those policymakers. The folks at the White House love to hear it, right? We're always sharing that. And the same with folks in Congress, because there's, this is a job we're all in here together to accomplish. But, Brian, I heard, a number of things that you're advocating for. When they understand the efforts that you made in this situation, they really see you as a partner, across the board, and people are more eager to help their allies. So, look, this is an opportunity and really engage.
So John, I just throw out, you saw what Sarah posted about the Kentucky Horse Park, which was great, and Lawrence shared something. And I just got a notice here saying that Governor Cuomo had announced a new pop-up vaccination site at Belmont Park to coincide with the racing festival for the running of the Belmont Stakes. So they're really excited about that. There's some incentives he's thrown in there for that too. And he was quoted as saying, "We're using every tool in our arsenal to defeat this and revitalize our economy." So some interesting things going on, some very exciting opportunities at Belmont Stakes.
That's excellent.
All right, Julie, do you see anything else in the queue?
I don't, and I want to say,
Okay.
John, thank you so much for working with us. We were delighted with the PSA that came out, and gave a little plug to everybody and hopefully encourage folks to get out there. And I think you're spot on about the youth component of this. You know, we have a lot of young people in the horse industry, and we want to encourage them to get their vaccines too and make that available to them. So we'll keep in touch. Thank you.
100%. Thanks for the partnership. Anytime.
Thank you, John. Have a great day.
You too.
So it's good to hear, more good news on the, recovery and rebuild front. In addition to helping launch the PSA, AHC does continue to work with industry partners to lobby for available legislative remedies to rebuild from the pandemic. In May, AHC joined the Economic Bridge Coalition. This is a diverse group representing the travel industry and live events, among other groups. The coalition is fighting for industry-neutral treatment of pandemic grants currently being administered by the federal government. We are very happy to be joined this morning by the coalition's founder, Dr. John McClelland. He works as Vice President of Government Affairs and Chief Economist for the American Rental Association. John, thank you very much for talking to our group and fill us in on all the activities of the Economic Bridge Coalition. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. And Julie and Brian, thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. Let me tell you a little bit. You see behind me, my background says ARA, American Rental Association, ARA show. Who are we? Well, we represent the equipment and event rental industry. And so these are my members, about 5,000 of them, rent construction equipment and tools and all kinds of things like that that are used in construction and home remodeling. And a number of you, I'm sure, are DIY enthusiasts and may have gone to your local rental center and gotten a tile saw or any kind of thing like that to do a little work around your house. But we do have a significant number of members that are in the event space and rent equipment. And interestingly enough, I had seen actually your PSA and what is the common theme in that PSA, and that is events. All of those things are events: the football games, the wrestling matches, the horse shows, the rodeos, the PGA Tour events. And just think about when you see one of those things on TV, and especially a PGA Tour event, it's a little bit more out front there. All of those tents and tables and chairs and the portable power and everything that's there for that event is rented. So our members have that kind of activity, business activity all over the place. And I can tell you, as having attended the Gold Cup in Northern Virginia many times, that my members have lots of stuff, lots of equipment on that site every time that event occurs. So events, and even more generally gathering, are sort of the key aspects of what we were looking at. How are our businesses going to survive the pandemic and rebuild and thrive in the future? How did we form this? Well, I think a lot of you probably understand that coalitions are a way of life in Washington. ARA has been members of lots of different ones on tax issues, on healthcare issues. But we didn't really have one going into the pandemic on this because it was something that we didn't really know was going to happen. But as things developed, we were as an association very active in supporting programs like PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. Also, the Employee Retention Tax Credit is something that we were in favor of. But as time went on, we realized that PPP wasn't going to last long enough to get our folks through. We were very early, a year ago, well, more than a year ago now, writing to SBA and to Treasury and in the Trump administration, asking whether or not we could get second draws of PPP. And the answer we got back was no. Unfortunately, that would require some sort of congressional action. And we began pushing for that and did so all summer long last year and all the way into the fall. And of course, we always hope that Congress is going to act in a timely manner, and they almost never do. But finally, at the end of the year, there was activity in the Consolidated Appropriations Act that allowed us to get second draws of PPP. There were also some other provisions, and Brian sort of mentioned some of those, the Restaurant Relief Fund and the Shuttered Venues program that had some very specific targeted funding for industries that were particularly part of or identified through something called the North American Industry Classification Codes, NAICS. Now, for those of you who don't know what NAICS are, they're part of the census, okay? So every 5 years, the government does what's called the economic census, and you all have probably participated in that. And this is a way for the government to count up what kind of activity is happening, economic activity is happening out there in businesses. It was never designed for something like this, but unfortunately it was used for something like this. And that is, deciding who is going to be eligible for aid and who's not going to be eligible for aid under different programs that are coming out. PPP was always pretty much agnostic to who you were. It was just like if you're a small business, then you're going to get assistance. And then ultimately, if you're a small business with at least so much percentage in losses, you're going to get help. A little bit of that was aimed at restaurants. They got a bigger multiplier on their PPP grants than others. As part of the final appropriations bill, they got 3.5 times their covered period payroll as opposed to 2.5 times. But then when we went into the American Relief Act, and we got a specific fund for restaurants, we already had a specific fund for shuttered venues. I mean, this was, in our view, Congress picking winners and losers and leaving one heck of a lot of businesses represented by a number of trade associations essentially out in the cold. I was on a few phone calls with members of Congress in the January, February time period, and found out that when I expressed my concerns, there were also others on those calls that were expressing their concerns. And so we started talking to each other, and one thing sort of led to another, and we ultimately ended up putting together something that we decided to call the Economic Bridge Coalition, because in fact it's such a broad coalition that it's really not just events or travel or parks and amusements or fairs and expositions or air shows. I mean, all of those folks are in. And in fact, our newest member, who we will be announcing real soon here, are the Custom Tailor and Design Association, the oldest trade association in America, who represent folks. And think about it, they're working on costumes for theatrical productions. They're working on custom-made apparel, all kinds of things like that. And just think about what's happened to their members. So we have a broad-based coalition here representing, in my estimate, from what I've been able to glean from the numbers that folks have sent in, over $1 trillion in economic activity in the U.S. economy, and that's a huge number. So we always felt that, you know, we had strength in numbers, and that's what was behind us forming the coalition. And we were really thrilled to have the American Horse Council be one of the charter members of the coalition, and have really appreciated all the input that Brian in particular has given us, and the cooperation that he's given us to help us, put together our policy paper, craft that, and as well as our press releases, and to really work with us to figure out where we're going. That then gets to the good question: where are we going? Our issue right now, and I think that a little bit of what we heard here is, what's the appetite on Capitol Hill for continuing to provide relief? Okay, and the idea of providing more relief, I think, is getting well, it's very challenging. I think there are a lot of members of Congress who believe that we've provided enough relief. We need to get back to rebuilding. So we have started to pivot with respect to our message to a rebuilding message as opposed to a relief message. I mean, the economy is opening up. My members in the event rental segment tell me that business is coming back. But they aren't out of the woods, nor are all of you out of the woods, nor are many other members of the coalition out of the woods, for a number of different reasons. Shows have been canceled. Fairs have been canceled. Travel oftentimes was booked a long time ago. Those travel agents haven't gotten any income from those trips because they don't get the money until the trip's actually taken. And then you think about situations like with parks and attractions, where they sell season passes, and now folks are going to just come and use those season passes now in the year after they were basically canceled or closed. So they have to make good on that financial obligation that they have to their customers. So these are all reasons why income isn't being produced to get folks through to the other side, and why we think that we need to have more financial assistance available to all of our industries and any business that has been severely impacted by the pandemic, and needs. John mentioned this, a long runway for the NFL. I think a long runway is good. They get to plan how they're going to reopen and everything, but the long runway for most of our businesses in the coalition is a long runway back to normal, and back to being able to have participate fully in the economic activity that they were pre-pandemic. So that's the issue that we have. And our solution right now is any and all programs that are out there that can help our members. Of course, we're going to need more funding, and that is really going to be the challenge of getting more funding on the direct grant side, whether it be opening up shuttered venues or restaurant relief funds, or getting a third draw of PPP. There's going to have to be more money out there. So that's in terms of direct grants, that's what we're looking at. And I think the challenge right now is also that we don't really have a bill. We don't have a champion out there in Congress. We're looking for one or more than one vigorously, and that's one of the things that the coalition continues to work on all the time. I think the other thing that we have done here is that we've also decided that one road is not, you don't want to just go down one road. you want to find as many opportunities as you can. And I mentioned a few minutes ago the employee retention tax credit, which has become quite generous. It's been revised a couple of times since it was passed originally over a year ago in the CARES Act. And the provisions of that would essentially allow businesses to get a refundable credit for up to $10,000 worth of qualified wages that are paid every quarter. So that's 70% of that. So that's $7,000 a quarter. So potentially in 2021, a business could get $28,000 per employee making more than $10,000 a quarter as a refundable credit. So this could be considerably beneficial as well. And that, by the way, you can claim every quarter. You don't have to wait until the end of the year when you file your taxes. So we also see the possibility of working as we move along through the legislative calendar of trying to, again, expand and extend the employee retention tax credit beyond its sunset date of December 31st, 2021. So those are the things that we're really looking at. And we're certainly grateful to the partnership that we have from the horse industry as we move forward with our coalition efforts. So Brian, I'm happy to take questions if anybody has any.
I have one question for you, John. So, you've talked about, obviously, there's a little appetite to authorize, new money for even rebuild efforts. Do you have any concept of the extent of existing authority where money has not yet been authorized or spent, actually, and could be repurposed for some of these rebuild efforts that we support?
Well, yes, and I think that any place that there is unspent funds, we could use that to pay for something. But I think, Brian, that from everything that I know and I've heard of, and especially in discussions that we've had on our coalition calls, there's no money out there right now that is unobligated that can be reobligated just through administrative actions by the SBA or the Department of the Treasury or any other agency in the government. That we need congressional action to specifically repurpose that money. And of course, I think that that's a struggle too, because you've heard in the infrastructure debate that's been ongoing that one of the proposals is to pay for a lot of this infrastructure spending by repurposing unobligated funds in COVID relief legislation has been previously passed. So it's going to be a fight, and it's going to be a fight that has to be fought on Capitol Hill, which is why we need a big coalition and why we need the grassroots to support that coalition when the time comes.
Very good. So let's see if I have anything else in the queue. Let's see, hold on. John, do you see what vehicles moving forward in 2021 do you see as possibilities where we could actually attach something to repurpose some of these funds?
Well, I think, Brian, we have heard a lot about the reconciliation process. You and I know what that means.
Yeah, could you explain for our audience what budget reconciliation means? That's a term of art here in town.
You know what, Brian? I always tell my folks that budget reconciliation is just a fancy way of saying you only need 50 votes in the Senate.
That's right.
There are lots of strange and arcane rules associated with that, but the fact of the matter is that expenditures of funds to help businesses rebuild, or the use of taxes or tax incentives, including something like the employee retention tax credit would be elements that would be acceptable under the rules of budget reconciliation. So I think that that's, with respect to the process, that's all folks really need to know. Because, if you get into the weeds there, it becomes an endless morass of craziness. But the fact that it is a process that ultimately only requires 51 votes in the United States Senate means that there are possibilities for moving pieces of legislation through the process. Of course, we would love to have a bipartisan process. I think that is very important. And that's always the way that we would like to go. But at the end of the day, if the only possibility that we have is to use the reconciliation process and to get either funding and or improvements to the employee retention tax credit, then we're going to have to do our best to use those avenues and to get something done. Because at the end of the day, folks, Brian and I have one obligation, and that is to help you, and to help you get the things that you need, the tools that you need, so that your businesses can not only survive but can thrive in the future. And that's what all of us who are in our business, have as the basic principle of our daily existence in our business lives. So that's what we have to do, and we'll use every opportunity and every procedure that we can to reach those goals.
Right. And just one more question, John, without
Sure.
going into too much detail, talk a little bit about some of the committees and other, I guess, stakeholder or constituent groups on the Hill that we've been pitching to lay the groundwork for something new.
Right. Well, primarily we've been working because a lot of these bills have originated in the small business committees. The small business committees in the House and in the Senate, now both controlled by Democrats, have been very important committees of jurisdiction. On the tax side, it's certainly the House Ways and Means Committee, as well as the Senate Finance Committee that hold the keys to moving tax legislation. But we've also, I think it's important to also recognize that leadership is very important. I mean, in these processes, a lot of times we end up with these negotiations are in what we call the four corners plus one, which are the majority and minority leaders of both the House and the Senate, as well as the White House. And a lot of times what happens is legislative packages all of a sudden go into sort of a black box called the four corners. And so making sure that, Speaker Pelosi and Leader McCarthy and leaders Schumer and McConnell, as well as the White House, are aware of our positions and the things that we're asking for and are important to our members. I think that's important for us to make sure that those folks understand who we are, and we're very clear in talking about what we want. And that's where I think that the whole issue of grassroots that you have brought up earlier is so incredibly important. So I'm hoping that we have the congressional cavalry revved up and rearing to go.
Right. Well, John, thank you very much. That's been very, very helpful. So look forward to our next meeting of the Economic Bridge Coalition to see what we can get moving forward this year.
Absolutely. And Brian and Julie, thank you very much for asking me. I really appreciate it, and I wish everybody the best of luck.
Great.
Thanks, John. We appreciate your partnership.
Thank you.
See you later, John.
See ya.
All right. So as you can see from our presentations this morning, there are a lot of issues moving in Congress that will create fodder for a future scorecard. And speaking of the 22 scorecard, let's take a closer look at a candidate who's off to a running start this year. Congressman Henry Cuellar is a long-serving centrist Democrat from Texas, the nation's top equine state by population. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Cuellar has outsized influence on the funding of federal agencies. He can also impact so-called riders, tools that we use often, to place strings on the scope of federal regulatory actions. While the 117th Congress is still relatively new, Mr. Cuellar has already stepped up to the plate to champion some very important issues. These include co-sponsorship of the Main Street Tax Certainty Act. This is a bill we mentioned earlier to protect small business. We are also expecting rollout of H-2B Returning Worker Exception Act of 2021. We expect that to occur Tuesday afternoon. Also, as discussed earlier, this bill would codify a substantial increase in the number of H-2B visas granted during a given year. If we can get this actually codified, this will take the whole H-2B guest worker visa debate removed from the uncertainties and sporadic nature of the annual appropriations process. While Mr. Cuellar will earn points for being a Texan, the Lone Star State isn't the only one in the union to claim an affinity for the industry. Moving forward, lawmakers can also earn points by representing one of the top equine states based on equine population. These include California, Florida, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Ohio, Missouri, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Colorado. So there you have an overview of industry priorities and their champions. I hope this leaves you with a sense of optimism about a path forward for the industry and the role we can all play together. We have many tools and friends available to help promote America's equine traditions, and also a more business-friendly environment in which we can all thrive. Stay tuned for details moving forward, and that concludes pretty much the formal presentations. I have some other topics that can kind of build on what we've discussed so far, but Julie, what do you want to do now? Maybe some general Q&A, or want me to shed light on things we've already discussed?
So just to recap, Brian's hit the highlights of a number of issues. We're going to drill down on those issues in some of our committee meetings. So you're welcome to wait and hear that conversation in some of those committee meetings later this week. But if you have something pressing on your mind right now that you'd like to ask Brian about any kind of piece of legislation, by all means, throw that in the chat box or raise your hand, and I'll be happy to unmute you and have that kind of a conversation. If we don't have a lot of dialogue left in this session, I'm going to give you some previews for some things that are coming up. And since my sponsor video didn't play so well at the beginning, I'm going to swing back and see if I can get it to go again before we drop off this session. So anyone questions for Brian that you'd like to throw out there right now?
Yeah, glad to take them, y'all. Well, while y'all are thinking of something possibly to bring up, I'll just bring up the Horse Racing Integrity Act, big event. Obviously, the American Horse Council always remains neutral on this bill, but it did pass last year. It was folded into the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. We saw it coming up late into September in the fall, when Senate, at that time, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell stated his intention that he wanted it passed by the close of the Congress. And along those lines, during the Racing Committee on Wednesday afternoon, we'll be joined by Dr. Jerry Black, who will give us some insights into the committee structure of this new authority created by HISA. So I hope all of y'all can join us Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern time for that.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Anybody questions? Okay, I'm going to segue then and talk a little bit about what we've got left today. Today is, again, is our federal legislative and regulatory day. So Brian had a panel and some speakers to talk a little bit about the legislative side. Coming up at 1 o'clock, we're going to hear about the regulatory side. Cliff Williamson is our Director of Health and Regulatory Affairs, and he's going to take the lead at 1 o'clock and talk about some things that are going on there. I affectionately say Cliff is our agency man. That means any agency that we have dealings with, whether it's Department of Transportation or USDA or Department of Interior, you name it, Cliff's the liaison with those groups. And so he can talk about all those types of issues and has got a fairly robust little presentation plan for this afternoon. And then we'll segue into the Health and Regulatory Committee meeting, where we'll have some guest speakers from USDA to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on over there. I want to do a big plug for tomorrow. This is our first ever state legislative day, and we have some great things planned for that. I'm especially excited about having Amy Showalter from the Showalter Group. Amy is a very dynamic speaker who talks about advocacy and grassroots, and her subject matter is called the Underdog Edge. It's intended to help provide you with tips and ideas for when you go in and meet with congressional members, either at the state or at the federal level, and give you ideas about how to leverage your position to make your case that's there. And Brian's got a great panel from a couple of different states that are going to talk about issues that they're facing at the state level, and we'll have some great conversations there. In the afternoon, the Coalition of State Horse Councils is going to be meeting, so there's some opportunities to hear what's going on from their perspectives. Wednesday is our industry sector day. We'll be talking about all the various sectors. We refer to those sectors as the 4 sectors that come out of our economic impact study. So we have recreation, we have racing, we have competition, and we have what we call the working horse sector. And this is the first time I can recall that we have really focused a little bit on that working horse sector. So we're going to have a panel conversation there. Thursday's our Equine Welfare Day, so a lot of stuff on tap there. We're very excited about Dr. Stacy Boswell. She's one of our guest speakers for that, so we hope that you'll join us for that. And certainly, last but not least, one of the things that the AHC does is we host or support a number of national initiatives, and that is what our Friday is about. You're going to hear more about what's going on with the Marketing Alliance. We have a Youth Engagement Task Force and a Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion Task Force we're going to hear from. And I'm going to wrap up by talking about the National Economic Impact Study that we have slated to do in 2022. So there's a quick rundown of what we've got planned for the rest of the week. So feel free, again, to attend any of and all of those, or you can hear the replay when we have them put together. We are shooting to have the conference replay available to you probably about a week following the conference. We want to do a little bit of editing and cleanup work, so it just takes a little while to take care of that. And then those will be available for your listening pleasure. Brian, anything else you want to say to kind of close out this morning?
Yeah, just expect communications from us following the conference. Hopefully we won't spam you if you're a member of the Congressional Cavalry, but we do have some trails bills that will be moving. We've heard this morning that it's very likely that we will have the Prevent All Sorting Tactics Act introduced. And moving into the summer, it's very possible that we could be lobbying for more rebuild grants and relief for especially our small business sector that's really struggled this past year.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so I want to do a last little plug, which is Brian mentioned earlier that on June the 24th, we are doing a virtual youth fly-in. Any youth and youth leaders are welcome to attend that. We're very excited about the lineup for that. Oftentimes when we're in person in DC, when we have youth attend, they go up on the Hill and go into those congressional offices and they make a big impact. So we're just leveraging that, doing it virtually. We are hoping to have a actual fly-in in later this year, probably around the September-October timeframe. And so you'll be hearing more about that. We're just waiting to see what COVID restrictions or not are going to be applicable when we get around to that time of the year, so we can figure out if we can come in person and go up on the Hill. Let's see, I've got one question that has popped up in the box here.
Yeah,
and that is about trails legislation. The person's asking, are we going to be talking about that on Wednesday? And the answer is definitely yes. In recreation trails and land use, there'll be a lot of conversation about that. We're excited to have Brenda Yanovic from the National Forest Service, who's going to join us to talk quite a bit about the Great American Outdoors Act and how you leverage getting some grant funding out of the Great American Outdoors Act to improve trails in your area. So be sure and join for that.
Yeah, and I'll add something there. So I encourage everybody to join this Recreation Trails Land Use Committee meeting on Wednesday morning. we're really going to focus on an example of the stage where we have successfully lobbied for a piece of legislation which has authorized billions of dollars that could benefit our industry and has passed into law and is actually being implemented and dispersed in the form of grants. So what the National Forest Service rep is going to share with us Wednesday morning are anecdotes on specific projects around the country that are actually getting funds to repair a lot of the trails that have been in decline over the past several years. So this is a real live, real-time snapshot of the good that can be done.
Anybody else questions before we close up? And Brian, you be sure and tell me if you can see my screen when I get this thing going here.
Yeah, we see you. Got that.
We at Piranha are very proud to announce that we are now joined the American Horse Council along with our sister company Adeptus. You know, our beliefs have always been to take care of the horse first, which aligns perfectly with the American Horse Council, and that they're there every day fighting for the rights of all breeds and really all disciplines. Here at Piranha, we pride ourselves in taking care of the animals that we love so much, and with Piranha, certainly we take care of those flying and biting insects that aggravate our animals. And so we're very aggressively pursuing the best formulations. The Ultimate Protection Collection, for example, our oil base, our water base, our all-natural zero bite, and our aerosol. All four of these products in the Ultimate Protection Collection protects our animals, along with our Spraymaster system that is installed in many barns across the country. No matter what breed you have, Adeptus is going to take care of your horse on the inside, and it's certainly going to show on the outside. So with Piranha and Adeptus, just like the American Horse Council, we're going to continue to protect your horse and keep them healthy.